Why do I learn languages? I love this question. I love dissecting the motivation that people have when learning different languages, really learning different things in general. But since one of my passions is foreign languages, I'm specifically interested in the motivation behind learning foreign languages. And I've studied several languages, and let me just say that I'm not a polyglot, okay? This is not one of those YouTube videos that you see where the person says, this is how I learned 7 languages, and then they talk in all the different languages. I'm not a polyglot, and I won't be talking in any other languages in this video, but I have studied some languages, and it's something that I'm really interested in. And so I thought I would share why I chose to originally study the different languages that I've studied. And like I said, I'm not a polyglot, so really I don't have a high level in any of these languages except for Spanish. The other ones are just languages that I've studied to a certain degree, but not to a high level. And before I continue, I just want to talk to you, my audience. This is the second video that I've made with this format, and I think you guys liked the first one. If you haven't done so, leave a comment on this video and let me know if this is a format that you want me to continue with. I'm speaking slowly and clearly still, so it's like my podcast, right? But in video format. You get to see me, but there won't be a lot of cuts, probably just a few. And this is the type of material, the type of content that I use when I learn languages. So this is why I'm making this type of video for you, like a long form video type of content for you to use to study English with. I'm not going to subtitle these videos, but you can always activate the automated subtitles. If you click on that button on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see that it gives you the option to subtitle the video. And so you can do that if you need to, but I won't do it for these types of videos. So let me talk about the different languages that I've studied and why I wanted to study those languages, what motivated me to learn those languages. Again, not to a very high level, but why did I even start those languages? And then make sure to watch until the end, because after I talk about the different languages, I also want to talk about how my perspective of my own language learning has changed overall, and how I kind of view it as part of my job now. Like, language learning is part of my career. So make sure to watch until the end, because I'm going to talk about that after I go through these different languages. With all these videos, I have some notes here on my computer, so you'll see me looking down, but I'm not reading a script. This is natural speech, except I'm talking more slowly and clearly than the average native speaker, of course. So first, Spanish. Why did I start to learn Spanish? Well, this was required for my degree back when I was in college. And I had to pass, I think, intermediate level Spanish in order to graduate. And so I had to. That's the first reason why, really the only reason why I started learning Spanish. Before that, I wasn't interested at all in language learning. To be honest, I actually disliked learning languages when I was in high school. Before I was an adult, I had zero interest in language learning, and I hated my high school Spanish classes. So I definitely don't come from a language background where I grew up around foreign languages and I loved learning languages. Definitely not. So if you are like me, you probably didn't like your high school English classes or whatever, but maybe now as an adult, the learning English is more interesting for you. I hope, right? So I started learning Spanish because I had the obligation to do so. I needed to pass those classes. But then I started, well, I should say I continued because of love. I know that sounds cheesy. In other words, it sounds kind of like not very original and kind of funny sounding. It's a little cheesy, but it's true because, of course, I met my wife, who is from Mexico, and so that's why I continued learning Spanish. And I learned it through her, really. And it became interesting for me after a while. I think after I met my wife and we started dating long distance, I was in the US, she was in Mexico. The language slowly but surely became interesting for me. And I started to develop, I would say, a passion for not just the Spanish language, but learning more about, I'd say, the culture of Mexico, even other countries in Latin America, even Spain a little bit. For the first time, I kind of got interested in, these regions of the world, and that kind of helped me continue on with it. But really, it was because of love. It was because of my wife, obviously. So Spanish was a unique case because I learned it for very personal reasons. How about Portuguese? So many of you know that I can speak some Portuguese. I used to speak pretty well, actually. Besides Spanish, Portuguese is the language in which I reached a pretty high level. Not high, I would say, but I used to have conversations in Portuguese, very easily. Fluent conversations. I used to speak in Portuguese all the time, actually. Unfortunately, I don't anymore, and so I've probably lost a lot of my Portuguese. But, for example, if you gave me a month or two to try to revive it, I could probably reach that level that I used to have. But I had a pretty decent level in Portuguese. I don't want to say high, but pretty decent. So why Portuguese? Well, I actually started getting interested in Portuguese because this was in 2014. The World Cup was taking place in Brazil. It was that year, right? 2014? I'm pretty sure it was. And so I started to get a little bit interested in Brazil because I started to watch soccer for the first time, and the World Cup was happening in Brazil, and I remember learning a little bit more about just the country, soccer in general. I think that I watched different videos about the culture, the country, the preparation for the World Cup. I don't know how I got interested in all that, but I got a little bit interested in that, and then the World Cup ended, and I continued watching soccer, and I think some of my favorite players were Portuguese speakers, like either from Portugal or Brazil. And so for some reason, I think that helped me keep my interest in the language because I followed some of those athletes on social media and they would post in Portuguese. And then I just started to become interested in Portuguese itself, just as a language, because at that time, I actually found it like to be really appealing to my ears. I thought it was a very nice sounding language. I liked the tones of the speakers in Brazil, for example, the way that they say certain phrases. I don't know. I just kind of liked the sound. And then I didn't really learn much up until that point. But then I started learning because of my job. I was an English teacher at that time, and I had tons of Brazilian students starting in 2017. And these students expected me to speak a little Portuguese, or at least to understand them, because sometimes they would just come to the very first class and I would say, hello, my name's Connor. And they would say, oi, tudo bem, blah, 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 right? They would just start in Portuguese and I had to understand them. So that, I think, is really what pushed me to actually learn the language more seriously. And then I dedicated a lot of time to that over a few months. And because I already spoke Spanish, it was pretty simple to use my knowledge in Spanish to then learn Portuguese. And then I planned a trip to Europe, and one of the countries that I was going to visit was Portugal. And so then my motivation switched to being able to communicate in Portuguese in Portugal. And I was able to do that, thankfully, but Portuguese in Portugal is very, very different from Portuguese in Brazil. So it wasn't that easy, but I think I did pretty well. So that was my motivation at that time. And then after that, I stopped needing it so much for my job, and I didn't travel to any Portuguese-speaking countries. So I kind of lost interest, and now I don't learn Portuguese anymore. But someday I might try to revive it and talk again to Brazilians or whatever. But Portuguese is kind of in the past for me. But if I wanted to, I could probably reach a pretty high level. But I just don't have the motivation anymore. And really, you need the motivation if you want to learn a language. And that's kind of why I'm talking about this subject, to talk about my previous motivation for learning different languages, and hopefully to get you thinking about your motivation for learning English or any other language that you're learning. So how about Greek? I studied Greek for a little while. I'm going to study it again next year. I think I plan on doing that. Greek was the language that I studied that had absolutely zero utility for me, meaning I didn't really have any type of situation in which I could use it. But I really, really liked learning this language, and that's why I'm going to go back to it in the future. The very first reason why I started learning Greek was because I had an interest, and I still do have an interest in the biblical languages, the languages of the Bible, right? Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And so That was kind of my original motivation. And I also really liked the history behind the language. Of course, Greek has changed a lot over thousands of years, but that's pretty cool that it has thousands of years of history, right? That's amazing. So just that fact alone makes it pretty interesting for me as a language learner and someone who loves learning about things like history and culture and things like that. And this was like my biggest language learning challenge up until that time, because it was a different alphabet and it wasn't as closely related to English. Of course, there are a lot of words in English that have Greek origins, of course. But when an English speaker listens to someone speak Greek, they can't understand like anything. But when an English speaker hears someone speak Spanish, there are a lot of things that they can actually understand, because Spanish is much closer of a language, let's say. So thinking of it like that, Greek was definitely my biggest challenge by far, because it was a much different language from what I was accustomed to learning, with a different alphabet, a more complicated grammatical system. But I really loved the sound of the language. And I think that's one thing that's kind of like, it's one of the motivations we have. Some people think it's not that important of a motivation, but I think it is. I think liking the sound of a language is actually a pretty big motivation. I think when it feels fun to speak the language because it sounds cool to your ears, I think that really helps motivate us. I don't really want to spend all my language learning time on languages that aren't very fun to speak, because I don't really like the sound of them, right? But even, for example, Italian, which I'll talk about in just a minute, when I was learning that language, even though I wasn't that motivated, it was really fun to speak that language because it sounds beautiful. It really just, feels good to speak it. For me, this is personal, right? There are certain languages that you probably find really beautiful that I don't, and there are some languages that I find beautiful that you don't. But for me, languages like Italian and Greek sound really beautiful. They're really fun to speak, and that adds another motivation to the language learning process. So that's another reason why I wanted to study Greek and why I will do it again. I've lost all my Greek basically because I stopped years ago and I didn't reach a high enough level where I can just pick it up again, like with Portuguese, for example. But there are still some traces of Greek in here, right? So when I do restart again next year, it's not going to be starting from absolute zero. There will be some foundation there, but not much, right? Because I did not even reach an intermediate level. So, of course, not a lot has stayed with me. So that's Greek. Why did I study Indonesian? That's probably the one that is the biggest mystery on this list. I studied Indonesian for probably about, I want to say 5 months or so, 4 or 5 months, something like that. Not very diligently and with a lot of motivation, but I spent some time studying that, and I learned a good amount of words, and I made an effort, right? But why? What was my motivation for learning Indonesian? Well, at that time, I was trying to find a way to make a career out of like making English content like I do now. And I thank God that now I have this career. This is what I like doing. I like being able to make content for people who are learning English. At that time, I was thinking that I needed to make content for people from one country and then like speak their language and then like get a big audience from that one country teaching them English while using their language. And I thought Indonesia would be a good candidate because there are a lot of people in this country and there are a lot of people that want to learn English, and the language seemed not too difficult, actually. It's a pretty simple language compared to others. It sounds cool. I like it. But that was a mistake because I didn't really have a very genuine motivation to learn Indonesian. It was just because I thought I needed it for my career. But of course I don't, and I don't speak Indonesian today. I've forgotten everything, basically, except for a few words. But yeah, that was Indonesian. I learned Italian for, what was that, 100 days? I did that challenge that many of you know about. I only learned Italian in order to create a plan for people that want to start learning another language from scratch, because many people have asked me to give them advice on learning Spanish because they're English speakers. They want to learn Spanish from scratch. And so I created this plan based on this challenge that I did, where I learned Italian for 100 days to a level where I could start to use a native speaker to have basic conversations with them and understand the native speaker. So I only did this challenge for that reason, to demonstrate how I learned Italian for 100 days with pretty good results, so that I could help other people, right? I didn't make money off of this or anything like that. This was just something that I wanted to do to help some people that want to learn another language. But I didn't have a genuine motivation for Italian either, kind of like with Indonesian. So, of course, once this challenge ended, I stopped and I haven't even thought about it since then. So, I don't know if one day I'll learn it again. Probably not, but I think it was cool to do that challenge. Okay, lastly, French. Why did I and why do I want to learn French? Well, I started learning French because there was a French school very close to my apartment in 2017. And I thought French sounded beautiful. And I saw this school and I said, I want to have another experience at a language school like I had for Spanish, which is where I met my wife in 2013. So I wanted to go to another language school, and it was just a hobby. I thought it would be fun, and I liked how French sounded. So that's why I started. And then I continued. After that, I traveled a couple times to Paris on my way or on my way back from Europe. So it was just for a couple days, but I was able to speak a little French in Paris, and I had a fantastic experience there. It was great to interact with some of the locals in French, so that was really cool. And now I'm doing it because, of course, it's a hobby of mine, but I'm also doing it for work. And this is kind of how I wanted to end this video to talk about this. No, I don't need French in order to talk to people like you, for example. But I'm using French to show, I guess, prove to myself and to other people that you can learn another language to a pretty high level on your own. This is what you guys are kind of doing, learning English on YouTube or whatever. And I give a lot of advice and tips about language learning, like in a lot of my podcast episodes and here on YouTube, and in my membership. People ask me a lot of questions about that. And I want to make sure that I'm giving good advice and not just thinking of things and saying them because they sound right. No, I want to be a language learner and give advice to my audience because I'm also learning a language or languages. So that's what I'm doing right now with French. For many years, I just learned languages very casually. That's why I don't have a high level in any language except for Spanish. But now I want to reach a higher level in some other languages. And right now I'm focusing on French. So by the end of this year, I want to be able to have a pretty decent level in French. I want to be able to communicate pretty well in this language. And I'm going to learn more about the language learning process as I do this. Then after I've done that, I'll try to maintain my French and have conversations in French. But I'll move to Greek after that, and I'll kind of start over again with Greek. And I'll try to learn it to a pretty high level. It's going to take a long time, I know, but I think I'm going to be a lifelong language learner. I think I'm always going to be learning a language because it's fun for me. It's a hobby of mine. But even more than that, it's part of my job. I think that if I'm telling you that you can learn English on your own, you can use this type of content, you can watch YouTube videos and listen to podcasts and just consume content that you like to consume, I want to make sure that I'm doing that too. So I'm talking from experience and I'm showing you, hey, I do this too and it works. So that's kind of what I wanted to mention here, is that my motivation for learning languages now and moving forward, it's a little different than it was in the past. In the past, I had different reasons. Now, it's for pleasure. I love it. It's a hobby, but it's also to help me as an English teacher, and it helps me talk in a more authentic way about language learning in these videos and in my podcast episodes because I'm doing it myself. So I feel like it's part of my job now. So that's one way to look at it. I hope that you enjoyed this video and this type of format. I know it's a little bit disorganized, but I think this is good content for language learning, for learning English, for example. I want to challenge you. If you haven't done so, you should sign up to become a Listening Time family member. The link is in the description, so you can get my advanced episodes in which I speak at normal speed. I don't slow down like I am right now. I speak at normal speed, but you have the transcript, so you can see what I'm saying. You can repeat the episodes. People love those advanced episodes. That's honestly the number one reason why people sign up for that level of my membership. people use those advanced episodes to help them reach the next level in their listening comprehension. So I really encourage you to do that. The link is down below. And please leave a comment down below and tell me what your motivation is for learning English. I'm interested to know, why are you learning English? And I'll go down and read those comments. And I think it'll be cool to see why all of you are even watching videos like this, right? Okay, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll talk to you in the next one.